When I was around 14 or 15 years old, I was home alone one afternoon and I was loving the freedom. My parents had taken my younger brother to a full-day event, leaving me behind. I had the whole house to myself, and I enjoyed it more than I probably should have. I'd only been left home a handful of times before, and I was used to having my family around, so this felt like a small taste of independence. I was bored, and one of my friends was having people over, so I figured I'd swing by. My parents had told me specifically not to leave the house while they were gone, but I didn't think much of it at the time and didn't listen. I grabbed my jacket, threw on my shoes, and headed out. Looking back, I can't believe how careless I was. I didn't lock the door when I left, which in hindsight seems like an obvious thing to do, but I was too excited to see my friends, and locking up wasn't on my mind at all. I was out for a few hours, and when I came back, I knew I had messed up big time. When I walked into the kitchen, I saw that the cabinets were open and stuff on the counters and table had been messed around. I started calling out hello, hoping that whoever had come inside was gone by now. I didn't hear a response, so I began looking around the living room and kitchen to see if anything was missing. Just as I was about to head upstairs to check, the home phone rang, an unknown number calling. I stared at the screen for a second, unsure whether to pick up. Maybe it was just a spam call or some telemarketer, but I answered it anyways. On the other end of the phone was just deep, heavy breathing. After a few seconds of breathing, I said, "Hello? Who's this?" Once again, I asked who was on the other end, and in the middle of my sentence, I was cut off by the voice on the other end, which said, "I'm in the house." I tried to play it off, hoping that it was just a prank call, but I responded by lying and saying that I was home with my family and there wasn't anybody in the house. The voice on the other end responded and said, "We both know that's a lie," then abruptly hung up the phone. Next, I heard a quiet creaking from upstairs. I once again yelled out hello, and I heard whoever was upstairs pick up the pace. The footsteps ran down the hallway towards the stairs that I was standing near. I was worried that they were coming for me now, and I went through the back door and bolted towards the woods behind the house. I knew that I had to get as far away as possible. I didn't stop running until I got to a neighbor's house who let me use their phone to call the cops. When the police arrived, they found the door wide open, just like I'd left it when I ran. They didn't find anyone in the house, but they did tell me that it seemed like someone had been there, obviously. So whoever it was who had broken into my house and potentially wanted to hurt me got away. I refused to be left home alone for many years after that day. It was about a year ago when my parents and sister went out of state for a sports tournament, and I was left alone in the house for 3 days. I'd never been home by myself for that long, and I thought it would be nice to have some peace and quiet. The first night went by without anything out of the ordinary. I watched a couple of movies, made some popcorn, and went to bed around midnight. I didn't think much of it when I woke up in the middle of the night with an uneasy feeling. It was not anything specific, just a weird sense that someone was watching me. I shrugged it off and went back to sleep. The next day, everything seemed fine. I spent most of the time inside, just relaxing and watching more movies. By the evening, the feeling started to creep up again, like there was someone there, even though I was alone. I checked the house to make sure that all the doors and windows were locked, and everything looked normal. I even walked around the yard for a bit to see if anybody was outside, but I didn't find anything. By the time the third night rolled around, I was starting to get a little jumpy. I woke up again between 2 and 3 a.m. and I heard footsteps outside. It wasn't anything loud, just faint footsteps like somebody was walking on the gravel path outside. My heart started to race a bit, but I convinced myself it was probably just an animal, maybe a raccoon or something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I couldn't fall asleep again, so I grabbed my shoes and flashlight, and I went outside to check things out and ease my mind. I walked around the house, shining the flashlight around, but there was nothing. I was starting to feel stupid about going outside alone in the middle of the night when I heard something from the woods behind the house. It was faint, but it sounded like a branch snapping, like something was walking through the trees. I don't know what made me do it, but I walked towards the sound. As I got about halfway from my house to the edge of the woods, I heard a loud, blood-curdling scream. I don't know if it was an animal or human, but it's a wild area behind my house, and it could have been a fox or a mountain lion. Either way, I freaked out, ran inside, and locked all the doors and windows. I peered through the curtains, trying to see if I could spot anything or anyone. I opened the curtains to a man standing close to the window staring directly at me. As soon as he saw me, he turned and sprinted towards the woods. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night, so I stayed up and watched more movies, and thankfully nothing else happened that night. When my parents came back the next day, I didn't tell them what happened. Since then, I've been home alone 5 more times, and I've never seen the man again. I don't know what he was doing and if the scream I heard was related to him or not, or just a coincidence from an animal, but it was a scary night. This happened quite a while back, probably over 10 years ago now. I was in my later years of high school and was home alone. My parents were at a wedding that required them to stay in a hotel, and my brother worked the night shift. At the time, my family lived on the East Coast in a city that was not the greatest. The crime rate was fairly high, and just a lot of sketchy things would happen. That particular weekend, I was looking forward to engaging in my normal empty house routine. I planned on playing some PlayStation on the big screen TV with friends, then order a late takeout dinner of either pizza or Chinese, and hang out watching TV late into the night. My older dog Cecil would spend the whole night on the couch with me just relaxing also. Cecil was an old beagle who had been in our family for 8 years. He was quiet, peaceful, and spent his time begging for food and sleeping. Unlike most beagles, Cecil never howled or barked. He was more than content to rest his head on your lap and spend the night there. At approximately 1 a.m., I had just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I heard a bang coming from the back alleyway. I didn't think much of it. Anyone who's lived in a city knows that noises happen at all moments of the night. Cecil's head popped up off my lap and the hair on his back stood up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down and started dozing off again. Not more than 2 minutes later, I heard another bang, and Cecil did something I've never seen him do before. He leaped off the couch and ran like the wind towards the door leading to the basement, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. The look on his face reminded me of a German Shepherd canine unit. I'd never seen him like that before, which got my adrenaline pumping. Through my dog's barking, I could now make out a persistent banging. There was a seldom used door in the basement that led to our back alleyway. It was old, rusted, and was hard to open, even with a key. I suddenly realized that someone was trying to break into my house through my basement door. Living in a bad neighborhood, I had learned and heard people say that if someone tries to get into your house and they move on after they realize the door is locked, they want your stuff. But if somebody is persistently trying to get into your house despite the door being locked, well then, they might be more dangerous. Knowing this, I rushed upstairs to grab the heavy wood baseball bat that I kept under my bed for situations like this. Then I headed down to my basement. I probably should have run or called the cops, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex, and plus I had nowhere to go. While I was heading down the stairs to my basement, Cecil went right past me. Suddenly, on the other side of the door, I heard a man's voice say some curse words, and the banging stopped as he ran away hearing the aggressive dog barking. I didn't call the cops or anyone else, which was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. I just sat up for the rest of the night with the wood bat in my hand. My brother came home that morning, and I told him what had happened. We went to the basement door to check it out, and when we gave it a tug to open it, the whole door fell off. This psycho was one good shove away from getting into my house, but old Cecil scared him off. My fat, lazy old dog could have very well saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they dismiss Cecil's actions as a dog doing what a dog was supposed to do. But I will tell you that Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life. It was almost like he knew the urgency, like he knew that the door was going to give in soon. It was around 8 p.m. on a Tuesday when this happened. I was at home alone with my 3 dogs, just lounging on the couch watching TV. The house was quiet except for the occasional bark from my dogs as they moved around the room. I was on FaceTime with my friend, and we were chatting about nothing important, just filling the time. Then I heard something. At first, it was faint, like a rustling sound coming from the backyard. My dogs immediately perked up and started barking towards the back door. I muted the TV and turned towards the window to look outside. I watched as a man approached my sliding glass door. He stopped and stood there, facing my back door, looking right at me through the glass. The dogs were going wild by this point, barking and growling. Even with the dogs barking at him from the other side of the glass, the man didn't move. He didn't even look towards them or acknowledge them, just stared through the glass directly at me. I told my friend on the line what was happening, and she urged me to hang up on her and call the cops, which I did. The man didn't move, and my dogs kept barking, but he didn't seem bothered at all. His eyes never left mine as he smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. He also kept mouthing something at me through the glass. I'm not the greatest lip reader, but to me it seemed like he was mouthing, "Don't look away," over and over again. I just sat there staring back at him, waiting for the cops to arrive. It was so unsettling, but I didn't want to leave the room and lose sight of him. So I would know right away if he began to try to break into my house. The man never did anything else though. The whole time he just stood there staring at me with that eerie smile, his mouth repeating those words, "Don't look away." Finally, after what felt like hours, I heard the sirens in the distance. I was hoping that the cops wouldn't use their sirens so that maybe the man would be caught. The cops were pulling outside, and everybody in the neighborhood knew it with their lights and sirens, including the man outside my sliding door. He took off, and the cops couldn't find him nearby. I haven't been home alone since then, and I never want to go through that again. Every time I look out that back door now, I picture the man standing there staring at me. One night, back when I was 16 years old, I was home alone and in my bedroom. Both my parents went out for the night, and my older sister was staying over at her best friend's house. All my friends were busy, so I was just up in my bedroom playing on my computer. At about 9 o'clock or so, I remember that I thought I heard a noise from outside near the front door. It sounded like somebody was possibly trying to open the front door. I figured my parents might have been home early, so I didn't think much of it. But after like 2 or 3 minutes, I never heard the door open, and I realized that it was strange. Then I heard the same noise again. At that point, I got sort of a nervous feeling, so I decided to go down and see. Obviously, it was late to be getting anybody at the door, and I never heard a knock, but my bedroom was far away from that part of the house, so I wouldn't have heard it very clear. Soon, I made it to the front of the house, and then to the front door. When I got there, I looked out of the window, but nobody was in sight. I also went and looked out of the other front windows, and saw nothing at all there either. I wasn't really sure what I had heard or thought I had heard. I couldn't really definitively say what it was, so I went around to a couple more windows and looked out of them as well, just to be safe. Everything seemed fine, so at that point, I decided to go back upstairs. I figured that if anybody had been at our front door or on the property, they had left. It was probably just somebody at the wrong house, if anybody was even there at all. So I got back up to my bedroom and then went inside and sat back down at my desk. Within a minute or so of being back at my computer, I had started to take my mind off what happened. I was feeling good and no longer worried about it. But then I heard another noise. This time it was unmistakable because of how loud it was. Somebody was knocking at the front door. Instantly, I was really nervous. I got up from my desk and left my room again. This time, I slowly made my way downstairs. I was nervous to see who was at the door, because at 9 o'clock it wouldn't be a salesman and probably not one of my friends. But I hung on to the hope that maybe it was nothing weird or creepy. When I got back downstairs, I walked over to the front door area. I was careful not to be in the way of the window to let whoever was there see me. But when I got to the front door and looked out, nobody was there. I went over to the front window again, which had a better view. Nobody was there either. I was really confused and also creeped out. I was telling myself that maybe it was just a prank. Nothing like that had ever happened before, but possibly some kids were playing ding-dong ditch or something. I stood around for a few more minutes looking around. That's when I heard this strange noise at the back door. I don't really know how to describe it, but I knew that somebody was there. If someone was at the back door, they would have gone all around our yard, which was fenced in, so I knew they were up to no good. I was really freaked out to go and see who was there, but for some reason, I did. I walked over to the back of the house, moving slowly and trying not to freak out. When I got into view of the back window, I just barely saw something. It looked like somebody was moving away from the back door and going further into the backyard. It was really dark back there, so I couldn't see much. I went over and looked around, no longer seeing them. Then I turned on the back light. For a second, I saw someone moving out of sight behind the trees. There were some trees partly in our yard and partly in the neighbors. For some reason, somebody was back there. I kept watching for a little while, and they did not return. I opened up a back window a crack and called out, "Hey, who's there?" There was no response, so I figured that they got the hint that I saw them and left. I thought about calling the police, but didn't because I figured that the person was gone, so I closed the window. I then made sure that the back door was locked and decided to go back up to my room. I hoped that my parents would be home soon. I walked back upstairs into my bedroom. The whole time I was just paranoid that the guy would return, but I was telling myself that he wouldn't. When I got back to my bedroom, I looked out of a back window into the yard and still saw nothing, so I sat back down at my desk again. I tried to distract myself from what had happened and focus on the computer again. After maybe a couple of minutes, I was starting to feel slightly better. All of a sudden though, I thought that I just barely heard the sound of the back door opening downstairs. I first went over to the window and looked out. I couldn't really see the back door from that angle though. I went over to my bedroom door and listened closely. When I did, I couldn't hear anything. By now, I was seriously considering calling the police. However, I just wasn't 100% sure of what I had heard. I thought maybe it was just my imagination from me being paranoid about what had happened earlier. So I decided to go downstairs. I quietly left my bedroom and tiptoed down the hallway and over to the stairs. When I got to the staircase, I looked around and saw nobody downstairs. So I went down them and was still looking around and feeling paranoid. When I finally got downstairs, I first headed over to the back door. When I got there, I could not believe what I saw. The door was wide open. I didn't see anybody in sight though. I went over to the door and closed it. Then I stopped and listened. I heard nothing. I called out again, trying to sound tough, and I said, "I already called the cops. They'll be here any minute." However, I didn't hear anything in response. Of course, I hadn't called the police. I wasn't sure if somebody was in the house or had already left. I went around towards the living room to look around. When I did, I was sure that I heard footsteps a little ways away. I stopped where I was. The footsteps were moving through the dining room and towards the kitchen. I stood there in the living room, too scared to move. Then I heard the footsteps seeming to approach me from behind. I looked back and just barely saw a shadow of someone starting to come around the corner. At that point, I just bolted up the stairs. I ran like crazy and went all the way into my bedroom. When I got inside, I slammed the door shut behind me. I ran to my bed and pulled the covers on top of myself. Then I called 911 on my phone and told police that somebody had broken into my house. After giving them my address and hearing that they would be there shortly, I just waited. It was now complete silence. A few minutes went by. Then I heard a quiet knock at my bedroom door. I was too scared to move. I stayed where I was and didn't do anything. The door didn't open though. Several more seconds went by. I thought that I heard footsteps in the hallway, just barely. Then I stopped hearing them. Several more minutes went by. Soon the police got there. I went down to talk to them, and whoever had been in the house was gone. The back door was still open though. And the strange thing is that nothing was stolen or anything. My parents got home a short time later. Nobody ever figured out who it was. It still creeps me out when I think about it to this day. I live alone. This is something that happened just a few months ago. So my apartment is pretty standard for the most part. However, the front door opens right up to the outside and there's a small grass area there. To the right of that is the parking lot. Then there are several levels of units. Mine is on the first level. I was at home one evening after I had gotten back from work. I was in the kitchen cooking, and right in the middle of that, my doorbell rang. I wasn't able to go over to the door right away, but I stopped what I was doing and then went over there. This was maybe 20 seconds after the bell had rang. When I got there though, I didn't see anybody. I looked out the window to as much as I could see and there was nobody there. So at that point, I just went back to cooking. I didn't really know who it could be or why somebody would be ringing my doorbell. I figured that it was most likely someone at the wrong apartment though. Nothing else happened for a while. Several hours later, I was in my living room just hanging out. Then the doorbell rang again. I remembered from before and wondered if that person was back. Then the doorbell started ringing again and again a bunch of times really fast. I was so confused. I got up and started walking over to the door. In the time that I was going over there, the doorbell ringing stopped. Before opening the door though, I made it to the window and then looked outside. When I did, I was surprised to see that nobody was there again. They had been ringing my doorbell so many times in a row like they really wanted me to answer, and now they were just gone. I didn't know what to make of it. I looked around for several minutes but didn't see anyone. After that, I went back to what I was doing. I only stayed up for maybe another hour if that. Then I was tired and decided to go to bed. I started turning off the lights in my apartment, but before heading to my bedroom, I went over to the front door and looked out of the window one last time. However, this time I saw something. There was this tall and kind of thin man just standing there a few feet away from my door. He wasn't facing me, but kind of to the side. He didn't appear to really be doing anything though. The guy was wearing all black clothing and I had no idea who he was. I thought that this was maybe the person who kept ringing my doorbell. It just seemed really suspicious though. I watched him for several minutes. The man just stood there and sort of looked around. Then he started walking away slowly. He went in the grass area out front, and then he walked across the quiet street that was there. After crossing, he walked right into the woods. There was no path or anything. He just went right in, and the woods there is very thick. I was so confused and also creeped out. Since then, I haven't had any more strange doorbell rings or anything. I also haven't seen the guy, and I'm still wondering who he is and what he was doing. I'm also wondering why he just went in the woods like that. This happened when I was in high school. I'm a male and was 14 years old at the time. I lived at home with my parents, and one Thursday afternoon, I got home from school at the usual time. Normally, both of my parents would be gone for a few hours after I got home from school. They would both still be at work, and they worked in the city. So on this afternoon, I had a little bit of homework to do, but not that much. I went up to my bedroom to get it out of the way. My room was upstairs in the house and on the back side of it. As I sat up there doing my work, about 20 minutes into it, I heard a car pulling into our driveway. I thought that it was either my mom or dad arriving home early from work. I paused what I was doing and got up to go downstairs and say hi. However, after getting to the main level of the house, I looked out of the front window to see a random car in the driveway. I had never seen it before. It was a fairly large SUV like a Chevy Tahoe and was black in color. Right after I noticed it, I saw the doors open up and 4 men got out while one stayed in the driver's seat. At that point, I moved back quickly and away from the window. I had never seen any of these men before and didn't know who they were, but they were all headed towards the house, and they didn't look that friendly either. It just looked sketchy. The men did not go to the front door though. Instead, I noticed through a side window that they were going around towards the backyard. Then the car that was in the driveway backed up and left. I ran back to my room at that point to get my phone. When I did, I looked out of the window and saw the men all going towards the woods in our backyard. We had a large woods mostly on our property that was towards the back end of it. After all the men entered the woods, they were completely out of my sight. I called my parents and they both said that they were on their way home but stuck in traffic. They told me to call the police, so I did. A while later, the cops arrived and I told them everything that I could. They searched the yard and the woods a little, but the men must have left because they didn't find them. After that, my parents got home, and soon after, the cops left. Nobody really seemed to know who the men could be or what exactly they were doing. I was just really glad that they were gone. So then, fast forward to the very next day. I got home from school again, and much like the previous day, I was home alone. My parents were not back from work yet, and I went up to my bedroom where I usually hung out. As I was in there, I noticed something out of my window though. I saw one of the men from the previous day. He was standing in our backyard just outside of the woods, and he appeared to be looking up at me. It creeped me out so bad. I instantly ducked down and then called the police again. They came out once more and searched the property again. However, just like the previous day, they didn't find anybody. After that though, I never saw those men again. I still don't know what exactly was going on there. Who were those guys, and why did they go in our woods? It remains a mystery to this day. This happened back when I was 12 years old. It was the summertime, and I was at home by myself. Both of my parents were at work, and this was probably in the late morning. I just remember that it was a really nice day outside, so I went into the front yard, and I was reading a book in a chair that we had out there. After probably an hour of this, I remember noticing a car driving down our street. A few cars had already gone by that I had noticed. We lived on a quiet street that wouldn't get very much traffic, mostly just people who lived there, This one car in particular was going very slow. It was a black 4-door sedan, and after passing by, it went further down my street and then out of sight. I didn't think too much of it, but only about a minute later or so, I remember the car driving back from the other way. When it passed by our house, it seemed to slow down even more than it was already going. I also did not recognize the car, and I couldn't help but feel a little bit suspicious. The car ended up moving on and leaving the street though. At this point, I was hoping that it was just somebody who was maybe lost, so I stayed outside and kept reading. However, less than 5 minutes later, the car was back. It once again drove by and was going very slowly. I just had a bad feeling about it. The car luckily passed me by and continued down the street. When it did, I decided to go inside of the house. After getting inside, I think I went to the kitchen to get something to drink. I was going to go to my bedroom, but before that, I stopped at the front window. When I did, I saw the same car sitting in our driveway. I couldn't believe it. The car was parked at the back end of the driveway, and I could not see who was behind the wheel. But I did see somebody in the driver's seat, and it appeared to be a man. I watched the car, and it continued to sit there. Nobody got out. I didn't really know what to do, but I remember that I soon moved away from the window. I walked around the house. I don't really remember why, but when I returned to the front window, I could see that the car was now empty. The man had left it. I didn't know where he had gone though. I looked to the front step, and nobody was there, so he wasn't going to knock at the door or anything. I went to another front window and looked out, but saw nothing there either. At that time, I was trying to figure out what he could possibly be doing. I couldn't think of any logical explanation though. I went to go back to my bedroom. When I got inside though, I saw the man at my window just outside of it. We locked eyes for a brief moment before I quickly ran away. I ran into the kitchen to get the phone and call 911. However, when I did, I saw the man running away past another window. He then went around the house and back to his car. As I was calling the police, I could hear him driving away. I went through with the call anyways though. The police came out to our house, and I spoke with them for a while, telling them everything that I could. My parents got called and came home from work early. It was one of the craziest moments of my life. I'm really glad that the man was unable to get inside. After that, I never saw him again. This story happened to me in my first year of high school, many years ago. First off, let me premise by saying that I clearly understand how dumb of an idea this was. But I was a younger kid, and I didn't think it through fully, and I just imagined that it would work. My parents had left to get my older brother from his friend's house because he had gotten hammered and was too drunk to drive himself home. It was around 11 o'clock at night, and I did what normal things a boy my age would do. Watched TV, played video games, and invited friends over when I wasn't supposed to. After my friends left my house, it was around 12:30 a.m., and my parents called me and said that they wouldn't be home until morning due to my brother passing out and needing medical attention. He had to go to the hospital due to alcohol poisoning, and by the way, he ended up being alright and recovered fine. I was 15 years old, home alone the entire night for the first time ever, and in the midst of puberty, I decided that tonight would be my night. I went on some online hooker website, and I found an attractive 19-year-old Asian woman who said she would do just about anything you could think of. So I hit her up and gave her my address. I told her I was about 3 years underage, and she said it was fine if we kept it a secret. It was around 1:45 a.m. when I heard a knock on my front door. I looked through the people and saw an attractive young Asian woman standing outside. She told me her name was Ashley and asked if I'd let her in. Letting my hormones control me, I let her in. She asked if she could use my bathroom first, and I told her that it was fine. While I waited for her, I looked at the car she arrived in, and in the faint shadow of her car, I saw another person sitting in the passenger seat. They were wearing all black clothing and looking at the house. I thought I was just imagining things, or that maybe it was normal, and this was her driver who was just going to wait outside the whole time. 10 more minutes went by, and she still hadn't left the bathroom, and as I was waiting, I heard footsteps walking through the rocks into my backyard. I was beginning to panic now, realizing how this was a terrible idea, and I shouldn't be letting random people into my house. The motion sensor lights in my backyard kicked in, and I went to take a look, and sure enough, it was the person I saw in all black before. Once they noticed I could see them because of the light, they booked it back to their car. The girl, who then came out of the bathroom, said that I scared her partner off and that she was going to go out and get him. Once she left the house, I shut all the entrances to my house and locked them all. She looked back and noticed the noise of my dogs barking, had a quick conversation with the guy in all black, and then got into the driver's side of the car and drove away. I don't know what they were planning, but my guess is they were going to kidnap me for human trafficking. I'm not sure if that was their motive, but I was led to believe it because the lady left her phone in the bathroom. When I looked through it, I saw mysterious phone numbers, and after looking up the area codes online, they were linked with known human trafficking countries. Also, she didn't even seem to care that she had left her phone behind, making me think it was most likely a burner phone used for shady stuff. I'm just glad the night didn't amount to anything worse, and it easily could have. I never told my parents because I would have been in a lot of trouble, but I still learned my lesson from that night home alone. When I was 12 years old, I lived with my parents and older brother. We had a 2-story home in a pretty typical neighborhood, and I liked it a lot. One night, I was left home alone by myself. My brother was over at a friend's house, and my parents would be gone until late. So I invited a friend to come over and hang out with me. It was my friend Jason, who lived just the next street over, so he could walk to my house. However, at around 9 p.m., he had to leave my place and go home because he wasn't allowed to stay out later than that. So we had been up in my bedroom playing video games, and I said bye to Jason and he left out the back door. I stayed in my room. I heard him leave, but only about 5 minutes later, I heard our back door open up again. I figured that Jason must have forgot something and came back to get it, and I didn't think much of it. However, I did not hear anything else for a while. I would have assumed Jason to walk right back up to my room or something. I stopped what I was doing at that point and listened. I didn't hear anything at first, but then, after a few seconds, I heard somebody walking through the main level of the house. This person was headed towards the stairs, and based on the way they walked, it seemed like a larger person or an adult male probably. I could just tell that it wasn't Jason. I was now very creeped out. It certainly was not my brother or my father either. I almost called out asking who it was, but I decided not to. Moments later, this person, whoever they were, started walking up the stairs. That's when I got very freaked out. I closed my bedroom door all the way quietly and then locked it. Soon after, the person made their way up to the top of the stairs and started walking down the hallway. I did not know what was going to happen. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, so I had no idea what to do. The person walked around the hallway upstairs for what felt like forever. Then, finally, they walked back downstairs. When this happened, I knew it was my chance to call the police. I walked over to my door carefully and then opened it as quietly as I could. I then ran to my parents' bedroom, which had a phone in it. After getting in there, I closed the door behind me and locked it, and then called the police. I didn't really hear any sounds from the main level of the house anymore. After calling 911, I hid under my parents' bed until the police got there. When they did, surprisingly, the person was still there. It was a man who I did not know, and the police arrested him hiding in the basement. It was a huge relief. My parents got home soon after. The man had entered the house through the back door, obviously. I think he must have somehow seen Jason leave and maybe thought that Jason lived there and the house was empty. I really don't know though. I have no idea where he came from in the first place. It was very creepy.